The Exorcist III was released in 1990 and is seen as the true follow-up to William Friedkin's 1973 horror masterpiece, The Exorcist. After not being involved in any way in John Boorman's 1977 sequel, Exorcist II: The Heretic, the writer of the original novel and film, William Peter Blatty, returned, and this time stepped into the director's chair to bring us the spiritual sequel to The Exorcist, though its journey to the screen was a bit of a bumpy one. So join me, Steve Clark, as I talk about 10 good things about The Exorcist III. Number 1. The Legion novel. After the disastrous reception that greeted Exorcist II: The Heretic, it would be 13 years before another film appeared in the Exorcist franchise. The origin of this story goes way back before then though. After the failure of The Heretic, original director William Friedkin worked with William Peter Blatty on another sequel. Here, Blatty came up with a story entitled Legion, which was to be the basis for the film. Warner Brothers were very keen for the two Williams to team up again. However, Friedkin decided to quit the project as he had conflicting opinions with Blatty on how the film should progress. The project was shelved, and Blatty turned the screenplay into the novel Legion, which was published in 1983. If you are a fan of The Exorcist and Exorcist III, I would heartily recommend that you read Legion. Although it's a very different beast to the finished film, it does have a lot of similarities and it's beautifully written. It has a much more sombre tone too, and it has entire subplots that were not included in the film. Blatty had such a way with words, he was a true wordsmith, and I really enjoy reading his books. Number 2. Blatty returns to direct. After talks to collaborate with William Friedkin fell through and he left the project, for a short period Blatty offered the film to Master of Horror John Carpenter, as Blatty had final director approval. Carpenter and Blatty worked together and spent a week or so working on the story. They would soon come to disagree, and Carpenter began insisting on an exorcism in the film's climax, where Blatty wanted to stick more closely to the original novel. In the book John Carpenter, The Prince of Darkness, Carpenter explained his reasons for not directing the film. I met with Blatty over the course of a week, perhaps a week and a half. He had director approval, so he was testing and probing me to find out who I was and how smart I was and whether or not I should direct. I was ambivalent about the script, primarily because it didn't have an exorcism. Our time together was a lot of fun. We talked about everything. I kept suggesting a third act exorcism and pushing the both of us to come up with some new, exciting and grotesque devil gags. Blatty was resistant. He wanted to direct it and wanted to stay very closely to his novel. I respected Blatty, figured out that he really wanted badly to direct the picture, and felt that I couldn't get what I needed, so I withdrew from The Exorcist III. It's ironic that Blatty was resistant to an exorcism being included in the film, as that's what eventually happened. After that, Blatty himself stepped into the director's chair. Having the writer of the original Exorcist and Legion be responsible for the film seems like a no-brainer to me. I am a huge fan of his other directorial effort, The Ninth Configuration, which does loosely tie into The Exorcist and Legion. After the kerfuffle surrounding Exorcist II: The Heretic with John Boorman, having Blatty in the driver's seat must have seemed like a safe pair of hands. Number 3. George C. Scott. The character of cop Bill Kinderman was played by Lee J. Cobb in the original Exorcist. Unfortunately, Cobb died in 1976. You may remember that Kinderman is investigating the death of Burke Dennings in the original film, and he struck up a brief friendship with Father Damien Karras. Blatty chose legendary actor George C. Scott to step into the role of Kinderman. He is still a homicide detective in Georgetown, and he has to investigate when a series of grisly murders that echo the Gemini Killer deaths from 15 years before start to occur again. I think Scott is terrific in The Exorcist III. He has a real-world weariness about his job, most of his colleagues, but he is still great at his job. Despite the horrors going on around him, he is a thorough and decent cop. Scott was nominated for a Golden Razzie Award for his portrayal of Kinderman, which frankly stuns the pants off of me. There are moments in the film where his character explodes in rage or anger, but I think these moments are entirely justified due to what is going on around the character. I love Scott in this, and in a future video, I will be talking about another of my George C. Scott favourite horrors. Ooh, I'm such a tease! Number 4. The relationship between Kinderman and Father Dyer. One of my absolute favourite things about the film is the friendship between Kinderman and Father Dyer, who is played by Ed Flanders. The scenes between Kinderman and Dyer do cover some pretty deep theological topics, such as the existence of good and evil, why does God allow evil in the universe, and if you're a fan of Blatty's work, you will recognise that these are common themes throughout his Faith trilogy. Though these conversations are deep, they are peppered with humour, and they show the deep friendship between the two men, who have bonded over the loss of their mutual friend, Father Damien Karras, who died while sacrificing himself to save Regan McNeil during her exorcism 15 years prior. I know there are a few discrepancies and niggles regarding both the timeline and the nature of the friendship between Kinderman and Father Karras. I'm not going to cover those here. There are plenty of other places online where you can find those topics, including a podcast episode where I cover this film in far greater detail with my friend Ben. Link in the description below. Their friendship involves frequent bickering, but they rely on each other, although neither will admit it. On the anniversary of Father Karras' death, they go to see It's a Wonderful Life together, each claiming to friends or family that it's just to cheer up the other, unaware that they both need the comfort. There are 3 key scenes that flesh out their friendship. The one at the cinema, both before and after the screening of It's a Wonderful Life, with the infamous carp speech, their lunch after the film at the Tombs Bar in Georgetown, and a scene at the hospital after Dyer checks himself in for some tests. The one I want to focus on is the lunch scene. It is here where Kinderman and Dyer get into a discussion about the existence of God. Kinderman complains that the whole world is a homicide victim. He asks Dyer if a God that was good would invent something like death. Dyer chastises him for going off and blaming God again. Kinderman states that we have cancer and children with disease, murders and monsters prowling the planet. He says that people and loved ones suffer while God goes waltzing blithely through the universe like some kind of cosmic Billy Burke. Dyer assures Kinderman that it all works out right in the end. What Dyer means is the end of time. Kinderman jokes, "What, that soon?" Dyer tells Kinderman that they will be there, as they will live forever, as their spirits. We have 2 friends here with opposing views, and are able to express those views to each other without fear or anger. I love that about these 2 characters. The film quickly establishes the friendship between the 2 men, which makes it more gut-wrenching later on when, spoilers, Dyer is murdered. Number 5. The dream sequence. There is a very surreal dream sequence which is set in a long hospital corridor, which seems to resemble a limbo-like waiting room for the afterlife. It looks like a heavenly hospital ward, purgatory, filled with people suspended between life and death. It's like a cross between a hospital and Grand Central Station in New York, with departure boards above an information desk, and there's a swing band which looks like it's been led by Glenn Miller. Kinderman is wandering through the room, and he first encounters Thomas Kintry, who was the first victim of the Gemini Killer that is found at the docks at the start of the film. Eerily, Thomas has had his head sewn back on, and you can see like stitch marks in his neck. There are several cameos in this scene, including one from model Fabio as an angel, basket player Patrick Ewing as the Angel of Death, and there's also an early appearance from Samuel L. Jackson, who is listening to a radio in the waiting room and loudly proclaims, "The living are deaf." There could be many meanings to this, and I think you can interpret that how you want to. To me, it could refer to a theme in the Legion novel regarding electronic voice phenomena, EVP, and the character of Dr. Amfortas. In the book, Amfortas has been conducting experiments regarding EVP and recording sound in silent rooms. He believed that the voices of the dead would communicate via EVP, but the living would not hear. It could also in some way refer to Mrs. Clelia, who we see later in the psychiatric hospital, who mentions the radio repairman. At the end of the dream, Kinderman is horrified to see that Father Dyer is there in his hospital bed. Dyer too has stitches in his neck, signifying that he has also been murdered. Kinderman says to Dyer, "I wonder if both of us are dreaming this," and Dyer responds, "No, Bill, I'm not dreaming." Blatty wanted the scene to feel like a conversation between the physical and metaphysical. It's as if Kinderman is encountering the souls of the Gemini Killer's victims, as he also spots the recently murdered Father Canavan is in the same room. The scene is beautifully shot, and as it's a dream sequence, it does have a surreal quality. The work from production designer Leslie Dilley is first class. Various techniques were used to give the viewer a real sense of perspective that the waiting room goes on forever. The Glenn Miller type music in the background of the scene also adds to the surreal quality of it. Number 6. The dark heart of the story. As I just alluded to, Father Dyer's murder is a real turning point in the film. Up until this point there has been flashes of humour, despite some of the horrific murders that have been going on, but most of that humour has been between Kinderman and Dyer. Dyer is the embodiment of faith, decency and humour, and he is ripped away from Kinderman in an instant. Understandably, this has a significant impact on Kinderman. His grief turns into exhaustion, his humour into bitterness. The film never really recovers its humour after this point, and I don't think that's a bad thing. The story really goes down some dark avenues, and some of the central concepts are chilling when you stop and really think about them. What happens to Father Karras after the events of Regan MacNeil's exorcism is about as dark as it gets. The last time we saw Karras, he had sacrificed himself to save Regan and died at the bottom of the steps outside the house. When Kinderman discovers that patient X in the disturbed ward looks like Damien Karras, this kicks off a number of scenes between Kinderman and patient X. Patient X is played by both Jason Miller and Brad Dourif, who are both excellent, and I will talk about them later. In these scenes we discover that the Master, who is likely the demon Pazuzu, slipped in the soul of the recently executed Gemini Killer James Veneman into the body of Karras just before his death. Karras, as servant of God, has been chosen by Pazuzu to be a reincarnated vessel to be used by the Gemini Killer. By placing the soul into the body of Karras as he was in the dying mode, it could be seen as mocking the resurrection by creating a living blasphemy. This was done as an act of revenge. Patient X sums it up by saying, "Let's call it revenge, a certain matter of an exorcism in which your friend Father Karras expelled certain parties from the body of a child. Certain parties were not pleased, to say the very least." Spooky. This central struggle between the dark and the light dominates the rest of the story, and to see how it plays out is one of my favourite things about the film. Phew, it's getting a bit dark, isn't it? I'm sorry, I promise that my videos aren't usually this miserable and dark. Number 7, and number 8, Brad Dourif and Jason Miller as Patient X. Okay, I'm cheating a bit here and giving you 2 good things in one segment, but they are closely linked. When Kinderman encounters Patient X, he looks like Damien Karras, and this understandably disturbs Kinderman to his core. His best friend, who's supposedly been dead for 15 years, appears to be alive and inside cell number 11 of the disturbed ward. When I first saw The Exorcist III, I was confused as hell when the character of Patient X keeps switching between actors Brad Dourif and Jason Miller. In the original Legion cut of the movie, which again I will get to later, Brad Dourif was the only actor playing the role. He was cast as Father Karras and Patient X. However, after test screenings for the Legion cut of the film, studio execs wanted more connective tissue between this film and the original Exorcist. They insisted that Jason Miller was cast as Patient X and the scenes be reshot. The original intention was to cut Brad Dourif out of the film entirely and use Jason Miller. Once the reshoot started, it became clear that Miller wasn't able to deliver the long monologues that Patient X needed to give. This was due to Miller's ill health. Brad Dourif referred to it as wet brain due to Miller's alleged problems with alcohol. The reshoots for Cell 11 were on a new set, so Blatty had to ask Dourif to come back and reshoot all of his monologues again. When Dourif shot them originally, he had weeks to prepare and get into character, but for the reshoots he had a matter of days. I want to say that Brad Dourif should be given a lot of credit here. One minute he had been canned from the film altogether, and the next he was being asked to come back. Fair play to him for agreeing to return for those reshoots. I think this is a rare instance of a studio exec interference actually working and adding a new dimension to those scenes. At various points in the scenes between Patient X and Kinderman, the character would switch between actors Dourif and Miller, and as I said, the first time I saw Exorcist III I didn't have a bloody clue what was going on. I think this works to the film's advantage, as it shows 2 distinct personalities within Patient X. When the soul of James Veneman has risen to the surface, we see Brad Dourif's face. It's here where Patient X speaks with venom, intelligence and evil, and we also get the odd, wonderful rant. When Patient X is more subdued and more calm, we see Jason Miller as the character. There are occasions where Karras does rise to the surface. The storytelling device of using both actors works really well. One thing that surprises me is Brad Dourif was not nominated for any acting awards for his performance. He is incredible in this role. He can be darkly and quietly menacing and then erupt in rage. His scenes are fantastically written and performed. I love the monologues. The fact that his performance in the film was done quickly as part of reshoots makes the performance even more impressive. Number 9. That jump scare. Yes, if you were worried that I was not going to list this in my 10 good things, worry no more. The Exorcist III is famous for one of the best jump scares in horror movie history. This scene is a masterclass of building tension. For a long time, the camera remains still in the hospital corridor as nurse Amy Keating is going about her night shift. Due to the earlier murder of Father Dyer, there are police stationed in the hospital. No score is used during the build-up. All we hear is the ambient noise of the hospital, footsteps, squeaking shoes and distant voices, and every sound we hear sounds amplified. There's a great jump scare about halfway through the scene as Nurse Keating investigates strange noises coming from a patient's room. She sees that it's just ice melting in a glass of water, turns to leave, and the patient in the room startles her by crying out. It really breaks the tension and it makes you laugh. On a first time watch of the film, it may even put you at ease. Keating carries on with her business. We see the policeman in the background get called away. Keating checks on another door and locks it. The camera is once again fixed in the same position, the long shot of the corridor. Keating steps forward and then wah! As Keating walks away, a figure clad in hospital robes appears out of nowhere, holding those huge Cronenbergian hospital shears in front of them like a weapon. I bet you heard the music in your head there, didn't you, when I was talking about the scene? I can't think about this scene without it. Barry Dvorzin's music here is like an eruption of sound, an electronic scream that when paired with the visual creates one of the best jump scares in horror movie history. William Peter Blatty and cinematographer Jerry Fisher meticulously planned this scene, and it really shows. It's a perfect jump scare that demonstrates how suspense can be constructed and then paid off. Apparently this jump scare has been cited by directors such as Ari Aster and Mike Flanagan as a perfect example of earned terror, and I agree. Right, before number 10, I'm off to change my undies. Number 10, the Legion cut. As I spoke about earlier, the version of Exorcist III that was released into theatres in 1990 had significant reshoots. After one disastrous test screening of Blatty's original version in Tahiti, studio executives insisted that the horror be amped up. There couldn't be an Exorcist movie with no exorcism. Morgan Creek forked out an additional $17 million for the reshoots. This involved hiring Jason Miller to play the role of Patient X, as well as adding a new exorcism sequence at the end of the movie. Blatty reluctantly directed the new sequences himself, but to be honest, I like the exorcism sequence. Yes, it's tonally jarring when you compare it to the previous 80 minutes of the film, and it is batshit crazy. We get some crazy visuals, but it is quite well done. George C. Scott wasn't happy about the reshoots and complained that modern audiences would only be happy if Madonna appeared and danced around. Due to these reshoots, it appeared that Blatty's original Legion cut would be lost to time. The footage originally shot for Legion had also been lost. However, in 2016, the Shout Factory label released a fantastic 2-disc version of the film, which includes the Legion cut, and it's also been released in the UK on the Arrow label. Although the original film footage was lost, the team were able to assemble the Legion cut by using Blatty's personal VHS tapes that had the footage. This does result in an interesting viewing experience, having VHS quality footage inserted into the film, and it is a bit jarring, but this is the closest that fans of the Legion novel will get to see Blatty's original intentions for the film. As I alluded to earlier, Jason Miller does not appear in this version at all. Brad Dourif alone is in the role of Karras, Patient X. The majority of the restored scenes do focus on him and his scenes with Kinderman in Cell 11. Dourif's scenes here are just as impressive as they are in the theatrical cut. The monologues are slightly longer and were not trimmed for time. The set design for Cell 11 is more medieval looking rather than a hospital cell. It's quite interesting. The ending of the film is far more subdued. Spoilers! There is no exorcism or grand banging horror film climax. I won't spoil the ending for those who may not have seen it yet, but it is closer in tone to Blatty's original intentions. The first time I saw it, it reminded me of the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2. Due to the quality of the footage, it can't really be considered a movie. It's more of a curio, a hodgepodge of footage that gives you a real indication of what the original version of the film would be. Saying all that though, I love both versions of the film. I usually watch them as a double bill or one night after another. It's fascinating to see the two versions in close succession, plus I'll give myself any excuse to watch Exorcist III over and over again. So those are my 10 good things about Exorcist III. I know that I've left a ton of stuff out, but my channel is called 10 Good Things, not 25 Good Things. What do you think about my choices? Do you agree? Disagree? Please let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. And also check out my previous videos where I discuss 10 good things about Jaws 2 and Damien Omen 2. I'll be back again soon, where I'll be talking about another George C. Scott horror film, but in the meantime, good night.